No Retreat: The Russian Front is an amazing game, and this video is part 8 of a series chronicling one of the best games I have ever played of it. Join us here today to see how things end up on Legendary Tactics. Mid-1943 is a much better time for the Russian Red Army. The Germans are on their back foot, and now it is about shifting gears to go on the offensive. And we begin with turn 13. These are the reinforcements that are coming this turn for both sides. And here's a quick glance at what other stuff is coming up. Now, there's this leftover combat result from last turn. There was an exchange right here, and my opponent has a choice between reducing the 4th Army or moving the 17th Army to the destroyed box. Interestingly, chooses to move the 17th Army to the destroyed box. I'm not sure if that's a good move or not, but it really came down to whatever he felt was the need at the time. So my opponent takes the reinforcement as well as the blitz marker that he's entitled to this turn. And now he draws up his fresh hand of cards and plays one. Now this is actually the one that is played. The app is showing it properly. This is Albert Speer Reorganizes Economy. Draw 3 cards into your hand, then discard 1 card. So it's quite a good action card, that one. And my opponent discards Soviet Industrial Relocation, which is probably a wise move given where we are in the game. And he discards his card. We take a look at the supply. Everyone is all in supply. And right now it's the organization phase. And he spends some cards to restore the 2nd Army and the 17th Army back into, get them back into circulation. He may have gotten a bit jumpy as he begins to retreat the 16th and 18th Armies. Perhaps there was an opportunity for being surrounded there, but anyway, I felt that there wasn't a heck of a lot of strength opposing them in that particular location. But that's what I guess that's what the fear of the Red Army here is, which I am becoming quite powerful. I think that's maybe playing into his gameplay. And near Moscow, we have General Retreat. The 4th Panzer moves back, 9th Army joins, the 2nd Panzer retreats, 3rd Panzer pushes back with the 4th Army joining. I think that there's some basically an attempt to reconstruct the line and keep away from any sort of encirclement that might be coming. In the south, as we take a look, retreat from Rostov. Again, looking to reconstitute the line. It appears to be the German army still has, some teeth, but obviously now is on the back foot. And again, in the south, we have some rearrangement going on, looking to reinforce Stalino. And again, just to give me a little bit of ground. It's interesting in the comments, Scipio says, the fade too fast? Perhaps. It's a good question. The Germans definitely seem much more fearful. I think the psychological effect of having an 8-4 or a 7-3 bearing down is potentially really interfering with his play here. And I play a card which again, I'm not sure if this is showing the exact card that I played, Na Berlin, which allows me to play immediately the top card on the discard deck. When I take a look at that, it says unseasonal weather, which based on the conversation, it seems that it was actually Red Orchestra that I ended up playing, even though it doesn't show that here. Once again, Vassal, for whatever reason, is misremembering the cards that were played at the time. And so I'll take a look at the hand. And again, I've got no idea if this is actually accurate if Vassal's misremembering the cards again. I'll just pan across here a second and let you take a look here. This is what it appears that I'm up against. So in the end, I'm gonna have a chance to look at the cards there and discard the one that I want to remove from contention. And then Scipio actually makes a play just that unfortunately was forgotten to put the Romanians in the rail movement box to put them on the train, and I'm fine with letting that one go. After discarding my card, the Romanians end up moving into Rostov, which is kind of interesting, kind of throwing them into the path of a lot of danger there, but maybe just as a delaying tactic. Looking at the cards, I think I'd like to discard all of them. However, I can only choose one, and really discarding one with Gott mit uns in hand, the problem is that any card I discard can be used by playing that card. So that's the one I think that has to go, which that one made the most sense to me. Now I think that, again, assuming the other cards are displaying correctly, they're all very good combat cards, and it's all good to know that they are in play, even if I can't do anything about it. Now, leaving my opponent's cards in sight there, I'm just going to take the opportunity to drop my hand as it is my turn. Now I'm going to play a card, and I'm not sure whether it's actually Stavka. It doesn't seem to make sense with the gameplay from here. But at any rate, a card is played, and it allows me to move the third Baltic comes back into play. And again, I'm not sure if that's due to card effect. It's not clear from the interaction and the gameplay whether this was actually the right card played. Once again, Vassal strikes. And before I forget, I'm going to put the disorganized marker on my replacement army, third Baltic, and I'll get rid of this card. And things get interesting with the current turn. I can actually upgrade 2 Russian units. And so I think this is going to really snowball as time goes on. We're going to update the Bryansk unit to the 4th tank and the Kursk unit to the 6th tank. And now we're really beginning to build up some attack strength and also some mobility, which we'd been lacking up to this point. And we will take back our cadre unit. I'm not sure why I put it in the German available units box, but there you go. And the steppe unit arrives in Stalingrad, and we are getting, you can see, I mean, even if the Germans had more strength than they do, you can see the defense in depth here just makes this an endless slog, which is perfect. But my mindset needs to shift now to more of an offensive focus. And now it's time for replacements. So we're going to bring back that first Ukraine, that lovely 6-3, and discard some cards to make it happen. And first Ukraine returns in Gorky. The only downside is that has to receive a disorganized marker, but there you go, it's back in play. And a quick check of supply reveals that everything is good. The Germans really don't pose much of a threat in that sense anymore, and may not for the rest of the game. And now for movement, and without as much to fear, I think just a general advance all along the line is going to be a decent play. I don't really have much in the way of fearing for encirclement or counterattack. I'm just going to move up and make sure that that line is nice and solid. And in some cases becoming quite quite a powerful stack. We're going to target the units that are the strongest if possible. Especially the 2nd Panzer would be great to knock out of this game. And it's important to note that now at this stage, tank units may stack together with infantry units, or well, I should say another unit, and that was why I thought to upgrade the 2 armored units so we could start building some stacks and get some good offensive work done. In the south, we do some further advances along the line, really ganging up on the 2nd Panzer there, and again, just trying to make sure that we're pushing the offensive in general across the line. We've got a limited number of attacks, obviously, but again, it's as much about positioning myself to attack offensively, take advantage of opportunities, as well as it is about simply intimidating my opponent, because it can't be fun to deal with this Red Army that's gathering in strength. The first Ukrainian army is going to go into the rail movement box for reinforcements wherever needed. And I'm going to discard a couple cards, and we're going to send the 3rd Baltic here and the steppe unit to the rail movement box as well. I'm fortunate to have a wealth of supply at this point, and so that is something that is not only possible, but I think justified. These units can spring up in the worst possible spot for my opponent. And so we'll move those to the rail movement box now. The first target, unsurprisingly, will be placed in Rostov. The other 2 attacks I'm going to do are in the north, on Smolensk, and on this 18th Army here, kind of at the top end of their line. Now, what's interesting is it's not so much about, or not only about, trying to force my opponent to defend, but also I've seen the hand that he has, and any cards that get discarded for counterblows are obviously not going to be able to use for their card effect. So it's kind of an interesting dilemma that I've put him in, and it's just so nice to turn the tables. This is exactly the dilemma that I was facing earlier in this game, and you know, as the Russians, if you can survive long enough, then you get to have the pleasure of inflicting the same pain and suffering upon your opponent when the tables turn. So my opponent picks up his hand and gives it a lot of consideration, and interestingly decides to go for some counterblows. One in Kharkov, which is not totally surprising. The next one is right below that. And one last one here where the 4th Army and the 3rd Panzer are, it's actually a pretty impressive stack, and is actually at a weak point in my line, so it's not a bad place to be, to place that actually. At what cost? There's some really good cards that had to get discarded for that, but obviously I think my opponent's identified a weak spot in the line and maybe is hoping to score a lucky roll or two to kind of make things a little bit more tenuous for me. But that said, I don't know if it'll make much of a dent. It may delay me a turn at best. Now, I do know that my opponent held on to the reroll card, and so that card's always interesting in sort of play by email type play, this kind of thing. You kind of have to reroll, redo combat, so you kind of roll everything tentatively and then see how things actually end up. So the first battle we're going to do is against the 18th. We have the Belarusian and Belarusian, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, and the South Army against the heavily damaged 18th Army in the woods. So that's a 7-3 shifted due to the forest. It's a 2-1 shifted to 3-2. The roll is a 3, which ends up as a counter blow. So that's most certainly going to be a retreat by the 18th Army. Making the 16th Army up here, making that unit much more tenuous in that location. And the next attack I'm going to roll for is Rostov down here in the south. We have a bunch of strength here. It's actually a 20-1 Obviously, it's 6-1, which has shifted 1 to the left for being in the city, and these poor Romanians are being hung out to dry here. The roll is a 1, which is actually kind of the worst roll for me. It's an exchange. And so looking at my units here, I want to keep my big stack. I'm going to lose the Dawn unit there. And so that's going to mean it's not exactly a fair exchange, but at least we cleared out Rostov, even though we're unable to advance. And the Romanians will be back in 4 turns, appearing again way down here in 1944. Next up, we have the counterblow in the Kharkov region here with my 6th Baltic. It's 6 on 13. Which is a 1 on 3. I roll a 2, which is a counterattack, which is likely going to be taken on by my opponent. And now up here we have the reserve unit against this stack, the giant stack there. It's a 4 on 10, which is a 1 on 2, and I roll a 5, which basically means a counterblow placed on me. And again, that might be one that I don't think that will force a retreat in this case, but it's actually a pretty good result for me. And we'll remove the counterblow on the German stack. And in Smolensk, we have kind of a big battle here. We've got some strength combined here between these 2 stacks. We basically have 17 on 4, which is a 4-1, shifted to 3-1 for the city. And I'm going to drop this card here. Again, I'm not sure if this is exactly the card, but we'll see it with the game effect. This would result typically in a defender retreat. And I guess it looks like it is displaying correctly. I'm going to retreat the army. Obviously, there's a bit of flexibility there if my opponent wants to change by 1 hex in either direction. But mainly, this allows me to break open the line, separate the 9th Army and the 4th Panzer, and the 2nd Panzer also looking a little bit isolated. That unit is actually now surrounded, which is going to require a rescue operation. So that was exactly what I wanted and why I played that card. Now, in the name of disruption, I am going to continue to advance with my 4th tank, and definitely put the 2nd Panzer now under threat. It's a bit of a tenuous line, potentially open to being cut off, but I like this disruption. It's really going to make my opponent have to scramble. I also just adjust some victory points and actually control of Kalinin, for whatever reason, was still showing as under German control. And now my opponent has the option to re-roll, although even though the results weren't great, I don't see how a re-roll would drastically improve what happened. So I discard my card and remind my opponent about the counterattack available in the Kharkov region. So first of all, my opponent kindly points out that I actually forgot to use my shock marker, unfortunately, this turn. But anyway, that was my fault. And even if I'd used it, who knows? It may have affected the result, it may not. Also, the attack with reserve, I miscalculated the odds. It should have been 1 on 3, which results with that roll as a no effect and not a counter blow. So he kindly adjusts that. Now in Kharkov, we essentially, because the cadre we don't think can participate in this counterattack. That's 11 on 6, which is 3-2, shifted for the armor involved, the Panzer, the unit there, the SS Panzer, which is obviously much feared. So it's a 2-on-1, so not hugely powerful, but with a roll of 6, that shatters my 2nd Baltic. So even though there's a retreat there, and I end up in the shattered units box. Now, what's interesting about this is it actually creates the opportunity for an advance. And so my opponent, after some consideration, I mean, maybe mistakenly, but looks to exploit the separation in the line to kind of take a position here to kind of maybe hopefully divide my forces, maybe cause me a bit of anxiety. But remember, I've got a lot of units in the rail movement box, so I think any breakthrough would be limited. And this was probably a mistake. Although we're both kind of in uncharted territory here, having the game go on as long as it has. And the advance continues into this city here. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that because I've some of these places are hard to pronounce. So we move to the removals phase, and I'll remove the disorganized markers on the 1st Ukraine and 3rd Baltic. So I'm going to detrain these 2 units, one near Tula and one a couple hexes from Stalingrad. And this more or less shores up the front and certainly makes it a little bit dangerous for that SS Panzer. It could be at risk of encirclement if it's not careful. But this is where it arguably may have been a mistake. It's tough for the Germans to figure out exactly where and when to be aggressive at this stage of the game. And then I'll detrain this other, the steppe unit in the forest near Tula. And then the turn advances into July-August 1943. And the Germans have a couple of reinforcements. The 8th Army actually is okay. But really, it's they're going to need everything they can possibly scrape together. And so we begin turn 14 with taking a look. Italy is invaded, which is a great thing for me. It gives me a victory point. And we each get 1 shock and 1 blitz marker each. So I'm going to take that VP, and that's always helpful. We have a few more on the way, D-Day and Battle of the Bulge and so forth. So looking forward to those victory points as well. And we have the reinforcements coming in. And for some reason, the control marker keeps changing in Kalinin. I'm not sure why. So we keep having to change it back. And make sure that the control is properly marked in that case. Scipio draws up some cards and decides to play the anti-Bolshevik crusade, which must be immediately played upon drawing it, basically to reshuffle the deck and discard pile. After drawing up his hand, we're going to check supply. Now we have the no supply happening in that forest there. That's obviously going to be a big point of danger. And unfortunately, my opponent misses the 2nd Panzer here, which is also out of supply at the moment, with all those zones of control surrounding it. Wouldn't be hard to sort of rescue it, but it is currently in that state. And in placing the reinforcements, we get the Luftwaffe in Riga, and the 8th Army goes to the rail movement box. So we're going to get some movement around in the north. The Luftwaffe unit is going to break into the zone of control to essentially be the bridge, along with the 18th Army, to create an opportunity there to extricate the the units. And the 16th Army near Leningrad is going to go for a bit of a walk here, trying to figure out where to settle. And now my opponent realizes the 2nd Panzer is out of supply, and dispatches the 4th Army to rescue that unit. It really speaks to how tenuous this position is. All of a sudden, there's even though I don't have great mobility as the Russians, it definitely feels like it's a wall that's just slowly advancing forward. Now in the south, we get some movement from the 8th Battalion. Suddenly everyone's looking a little less aggressive now, as they're essentially pulling back and removing themselves from contact. The SS Panzer dashed ahead. It was almost like a Battle of the Bulge kind of situation. Grabbed some military target and then retreated back to safety. Now, it's only turn 14, and this movement, this retreat, might be a little bit too early in a sense, because they're conceding a lot of territory, which might be worth fighting over. I know that there's a lot of open ground. It's the same thing that I had to contend with as the Russians, and it's very easy to duck behind rivers and so forth. Anyway, it's definitely not an easy task, especially since I've done my job in wearing down the German army. And now the Germans are going to choose where they're going to do their attacks, and they're just going to basically attack the 2 points of the line, which are kind of just sticking out maybe a little bit too far, which is fair. I decide not to do any counter blows at this time, and although I do remind my opponent that he has to discard one more card due to the red event, the two-front war, so that's hopefully going to again just make his life a little bit more difficult. So my opponent starts with the battle against the 4th tank. It's 13-5, everything in on that attack. So that is going to be a 2-on-1, and we'll see how things go. Of course, the blitz marker is used, which shifts it to a 3-on-1 and rolls a 6, which destroys my 4th tank, which is really unfortunate, but less devastating now certainly than earlier in the game. And so my opponent removes the target marker, the blitz marker, and my 4th tank to the destroyed units box. And now we have the battle against reserve, which is a combined, we have a 12-on-4 or 3-on-1, and rolls a 5, which is defender shattered. And after removing the target, the reserve goes to retreat a little bit before ending up in the shattered units box. So again, not certainly in some ways the units are in the shattered unit box there are actually in a certain light are actually kind of mobile reinforcements. It's actually not a bad thing to have. I do need to recapture that city, and certainly grabbing Stalino in the south and so forth will give me more options as far as where I can reinforce. But really, it doesn't do much. Even though the rolls were great, it doesn't really do much to damage my position. And the German panzers both advance in a limited way. They've built up, I guess that would be their killer stack at this stage, which is still relatively impressive, but it's just it's a single force that's concentrated in one spot on the front, and so it's not going to be able to do as much as I'm sure he would like. So it's the movement phase, and so the counter blow is removed, as well as all 3 out of supplies. I was hoping to get at least 1 victory point there, but it was not to be. And the reinforcement appears in Stalino to stave off disaster, at least hold me back a turn. I'm going to draw up my hand of cards, and I'm going to check supply. Everyone is currently in supply. The organization phase, I've got no reinforcements, but this is the flip step. And this is always an exciting part of the game for the Russian player. Looking at the front, I figure that the strongest opposition I face is near Moscow. So I'm going to flip south to the 4th Ukraine, and Stalingrad's going to become the 3rd Ukraine. And now we have got a pretty strong force there to push those larger stacks back. And we'll bring some of these shattered units back. First of all, reserve appears in Tula, disorganized. And the 2nd Baltic is in Kalinin, disorganized. Now I've got some extra cards burning a hole in my pocket, so I'm going to spend a couple of them to bring back the 4th tank from the destroyed units box. And just to reinforce my defense in depth, I'm going to bring back the Dawn unit into Stalingrad. And of course we're going to add some disorganized marker on it. Now, movement-wise, I could not wait to seize Rostov back again to liberate that for the victory point and to begin to move in on the 8th Army. I'm also going to send that newly arrived unit in Stalingrad into the rail movement box. Also in the north, I'm going to, with the Caucasus unit, I'm going to retake Leningrad. And after scoring that victory point, I'm going to take the opportunity to take this city back also. After taking the city, I'm going to bounce back to reinforce the front there, make sure that we've got a bit of resistance there, so it's going to potentially hold back anyone looking to retake that city, although realistically I don't think that's a possibility at this point. And after scoring the victory point, just a general advance. The 1st Ukraine's going to move up to challenge the Panzer units. We're also going to move the 3rd Ukraine and the 2nd Belarusian unit there. Again, just a general advance. The disorganized unit in Tula is going to move south there, and we're going to occupy the hill in a defensive mode with these other 2 disorganized units. And then in the south, we're going to move up to face the 17th Army and the 8th Battalion across the river. Looks like an imposing stack, but really 5 combat points versus my 3 is not something I'm going to be too scared of. And we have the opportunity to place some combats, which we will make the most of, placing them all along the front where we think we have a chance of pushing back, or even getting an exchange. An exchange at this point is, given the fact the cards that I'm sort of able to accumulate and just the overall strength of my army, it's going to be very hard for the Germans to replace these units if they lose them. There were no counterblows, so I'm going to declare my battle first against the 18th and 9th Army here. I've got 13 on 6 or 2 on 1. I'm going to use the shock marker essentially to offset the forest in this case. And I roll a 6, which ends up being a defender retreat. And of course, the retreat is subject to my opponent's modification, but otherwise I'm going to, again, just push forward and make sure that I'm taking advantage of the opening. Then down here, when we are facing the Luftwaffe and the 4th Panzer, we have, again, 14 on 7. All this was mathed out meticulously. It's a 2 on 1, and I'm going to play this this card, which is going to shift the attack 1 column to the right, again, to offset the river. Really is the main point of that. And I roll and I get a 6, which is once again a defender retreat. Now there's not a lot of options here for retreat. Again, I'm going to make sure that the retreat happens fairly. Now the one thing that I was confused about at the time was those zones of control, the 2nd Belarusian and the 4th Ukraine, are new zones of control. So I wasn't sure exactly whether those happen simultaneously or whether it's something where it happens kind of one after the other, or how that all works. So I basically left it to my opponent to resolve that one fairly. Moving down the line, we have the 3rd Panzer and the SS Panzer as the target. This one's a little more even. It's 13 on 12, which is 1 on 1. I roll a 2. It's a counterattack. Probably one that will not be taken up by my opponent. And then finally, the battle for Stalino. That is a pretty massive force, 23 on 5. It's a 4 on 1 shifted to 3 to 1 for the city. I roll a 4, which once again is defender retreat. But again, I don't really have a problem with that. The the German is running out of space. I'm going to advance and take over that our target city there, Stalino, and leave myself with a pretty decent force once everything is said and done. The pressure is on the 8th Army, and it's going to be very, very tough for the Germans to mount a counterattack. I'm just going to rewind time a second here to show that retreat from that for the 18th and the 9th. My opponent chooses just to tweak things a little bit to move the 9th Army there instead of where I had put it just directly backwards. Now in this battle here, Luftwaffe and 4th Panzer, my opponent decides to go for the reroll, playing Knight's Cross Wearers. It can be played anytime to reroll that attack, and we'll see what happens on that one. Unsurprisingly, my opponent chooses to skip this counterattack. It would be a 1-on-2. And in the south, my opponent agrees with the way I retreated his 8th Army. Okay, let's re-roll this one. And in fact, I decide that I don't want to re-roll that one as I play my my strategic reserves. Now, again, I think this card is displaying incorrectly in Vassal because the card that I played essentially cancels the Knight's Cross Wearers. So we're going to go with the original roll that happened. This was actually supposed to be conflicting Hitler's directives. Now, at the time I scanned the rules, this is a game back from 2012 when the game first came out. So there was some things that weren't clear yet with regard to the rules. So my opponent basically says, based on what we were able to find, these units are not able to retreat, and so they go into the destroyed units box. Now, the nature of the Luftwaffe unit is that when it's destroyed, it becomes a reinforcement in 3 turns. So it will be turning up in early 1944, along with the 4th Romanian. Now, in the name of being a good sport, I pointed out that the 18th Army, if it had been retreated to this space, then that would have actually cleared a path for the retreat of the Luftwaffe unit and the 4th Panzer. So I'm just going to give him the opportunity to bring those back. And yeah, I don't mind giving myself a little bit more of a challenge here. I think that was a much better move overall and gives the game a little bit more life. And we have some disorganized markers to remove off the 4th tank here on the hill with the 2nd Baltic and the Dawn unit, as well as with the reserve. Now, looking everywhere on the map, there's nothing really pressing. There's no front that seems especially at risk. So I'm going to detrain my unit here into this forest near Tula. Just, again, more defense in depth. And I'm looking forward to the point where I can begin to stack these guys more seriously. And I'm going to pause the gameplay here. Obviously, it is the next turn. We're going into the fall of 1943. And when we take a look at things overall, I think I'm in pretty good shape. There's still a lot of game left. But arguably, the Germans still have some teeth. There's still some good opportunities. My units don't move especially quickly, and I think that there's still plenty of room between where we are right now and Germany. Arguably, it might have made sense to sort of stand up and fight along a line that was a little more defensible, a little more further forward, see if you could hold on. There's less risk of encirclement, but really I can't criticize my opponent's play too much here. He's played very well. This has been a real back and forth battle. I'm going to pause the game here for this part 8 of our ongoing series, recreating this game of over 10 years ago. I hope you're really enjoying this. It's fun to put it together for you, and I'm looking forward to continuing it with you next time here on Legendary Tactics.